Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a Sunday coffee morning edition of the GPG podcast. England are playing tonight. We've just been discussing in the green room. We've got some plans for England versus Senegal in the World Cup this evening. So we're bringing you a Sunday morning show, something we haven't done in a little while. So hopefully everyone's got the coffees or teas ready, and we can have a nice little chat about what's been happening in the world of gaming over the past couple of weeks. Obviously, we missed last week's show. Apologies for that. It was mainly my fault. I wasn't feeling too great. Unfortunately, I'm still not feeling too great. I've had a bad throat for about 3 weeks now. Thankfully, it's a little bit better, but not great when you're talking a lot on a podcast. So, but this morning we have our regular trio. Luke, how are you doing today, mate?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Yes, brightly and early. Had my coffee, so I'm ready to probably have a moan about Callisto Protocol.
Oh dear.
For the most part, and well, some positives as well, but mostly a moan.
Yeah, we'll definitely be getting into that today. And Puxley, how are you doing today, my friend?
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm doing very well, thank you. Happy and excited to do another show. I do enjoy doing these, and it's just, as you say, shame we couldn't do one last week, but yeah, excited to look forward to. Excited to chat games with you all this morning, and I'm actually quite excited to hear what Luke says about Callisto, because I've heard, I think Luke, you was the one that was the most excited about the game, out of all of us, and so it's quite interesting to see the various mixed views on it that I've seen online. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to hearing your take. Really, I've not played it yet myself, but it may determine when I jump in.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll entice you to jump in, though, if I'm being perfectly honest, based on what I've heard from Luke. So, but we'll get into it. We'll get into it. Yeah, I thought we'd chat about the Callisto Protocol. Obviously, the reviews came out. There's maybe some performance issues. Luke's had a chance to play it. I held off because of the performance issues. I was ready to pull the trigger, but when I read things like the Digital Foundry review and I heard from Luke, I was like, maybe I'll hold off a little bit. But also last week we were going to talk about the ABK acquisition. There's a few little tidbits that have come out since then that we can jump into as well, and then we'll just see what else comes up. We've got the Game Awards next week, and actually I should probably use this as an opportunity to say we do have Ainsley Borden of Season Gaming fame join us next Sunday. We'll be back on our regular 7:30 p.m. UK time slot, chatting about the winners and I guess more importantly the announcements from the show. And look, it does sound like we're maybe going to be paid a visit from Keely's good friend Kojima as well, based on the tweets that are going out this past week. Is it going to be Death Stranding 2 as well? Because is that what that picture implies? Because I didn't get anything from that picture.
Yeah, I think so. None of that is from Death Stranding. As in, I don't recognize it as iconography from Death Stranding, but it looks very Death Stranding-esque. And there's I think the logo that he showed on the far left was like automated public something like some service, which sounds a lot like something that would be in Death Stranding. It sounds like an entity that would be in that game, delivering some robot thing, delivering stuff. So I think that one, more than any of the other logos, really looks like it's Death Stranding based. So I think we're going to get a sequel announcement and trailer probably.
Yeah, because that logo was fake, really, wasn't it?
Huh?
Were those logos fake? Like because I didn't recognize either of the logos on that screen. Obviously, there was Kojima Productions in the middle, I think, and then I think
that's the one in the middle is the one he's been showing for a while. So it's a different one. I think whatever that is, it's the main thing in the game, for the game that he's teasing. But they all look very, very Death Stranding like. I mean, the one on the far right looks a bit like some of the BT stuff in the game as well, which it looks like a squid or an octopus or something like that. It all just looks really, really Death Stranding-esque, like the way that they do logos in that game, kind of like super like postmodern stuff. So I would be shocked if it wasn't. especially as well, given he's been doing those actor teasers, big name actors in this, and the reveals of those actors have also had kind of the Strand imagery around them as well. So
yeah,
it just all lines up, unless it's a Kojima, a typical bait and switch, and it's something completely different. I'd be surprised.
Yeah. I don't think we ever spoke about it, Luke, but I know we kind of mocked, well, at least I did a little bit, not necessarily the podcast itself, but the announcement of his podcast at the Summer Games Fest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know if you've listened to any of them. I haven't actually listened to them myself, but I did read on one of them where he was talking about the abandoned game, which I thought was hilarious, that he actually publicly acknowledged all that mess that went on. So... well, it was inevitable that he was going to turn up. I think it was. Guess it was just a question of what he was going to show.
Yeah, he's always there. I mean, like it's the one thing that I think you can guarantee from the Game Awards now. It's Kojima. Like whether he has something to show is another thing, but he will be there in some capacity. And I think this time that he's got something to show. Hopefully, it's Death Stranding 2. I think that's. I mean, for me, it's great because like I wasn't really expecting there to be a sequel to that game. I know, critically it was a bit mixed. It got tons of 10s, but it also got a load of 7s and 6s. So
yeah.
And then like commercially, I didn't think it did well enough, but apparently it did. Maybe the PC port helped with that as well. So I think it's great. Will you play it? That's the question. Are you going to be? Do you think it will depend on what? Like, I wonder what he'll do. Like, what kind of game? Whether it will just build on the first, or he'll go in a different direction. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've spoken of my. I don't obviously think of Kojima's games the same way that maybe you do, mate. So Death Stranding, I've said it before, and this is purely just on what I've seen. Genuinely look like one of the most boring games I think I've ever seen.
You got to play it.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's in PC Game Pass now, isn't it? So I guess I don't have an excuse to at least check it out. But he's got like up to like 3 projects on the go as well. Yeah. So in theory, it could be any one of the 3. Is it going to be this this Overdose game? Is it going to be the Microsoft game? Are those the same game? How are these linked? But he seems to be a busy man for, it's not the biggest studio in the world. And,
no.
It'll only be their second game as a studio as well. So, exciting stuff. Pucks, did you play Death Stranding?
No, I didn't. I have the PS Plus subscription to give it a go, but it's been a mixture of time and not being too bothered by the game personally, but I should give it a chance. I do look at it when I scroll through the Plus store now and again. I think, you know what? I've heard people and Luke and other people talk about this. Maybe I should give it a go. And then it's just time, or like I'm just playing other things in the moment, and I don't want to stop playing that yet. So
yeah,
I just need to get the right point.
It's funny. Sorry, go on, Luke.
No. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I remember when it came out, and I was talking to some people at work about it, and I remember everything that we kind of seen. This was mainly pre-release, so we're talking literally a couple of days after it was released. I remember what I'd seen just didn't interest me whatsoever, and then I was speaking to one of the guys at work afterwards, and he literally was describing it as the best game he'd ever played, and it was the first time in a long time, or even ever, that I had been so disconnected from somebody else's opinion. Like when you talk to somebody about a game, you can, at least even if you don't like it in the same way that they do, you can generally appreciate where they're coming from, or maybe you like parts of it, maybe just not quite as much. And again, I haven't played it, so this is based on just what I'd seen. But like my opinion compared to his couldn't have been either further apart. He was literally saying it was his favorite game ever. And I was like, I was thinking, like, what? How is this based on what we've seen? So, maybe I didn't check it out.
I think the thing with Death Stranding is like that. I know it. Conceptually, you hear about it, and then you see a bit of it, and you're like, I just don't get it. Like, I just don't like. You can't imagine that it would be enjoyable to play, but it's really engaging to do things in games that we don't usually do. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think over time people will look on it more fondly than maybe some people did launch. And in fact, actually, there were kind of articles a couple of years after it released of people who'd gone back after they'd done a few updates, and they were like, "Oh, actually, like I hated this when I played it at first, and now I really enjoy it." And some of that was actually because it released just pre-pandemic, and it's obviously kind of a pandemic-y almost environment that you're in. Everybody's very isolated, so it's kind of relatable now. But it's just, I don't know. It just he tried something a bit different, and I really loved it. I found it very engaging, and obviously it's Kojima, so like the story's just fucking bonkers, and it gets increasingly bonkers, and there's big action stuff in it as well, but it's just different. So I would recommend it, but what I will say is that it is one of those games, unfortunately, where you have to have you need to play a good number of hours. Like the first couple of hours are quite slow because there's a lot of cutscenes, there's a lot of introduction stuff, and then you kind of let go and you can do a lot of extra stuff. So bear that in mind if you do play it.
Yeah, I'll try to check it out before the end of the year, Luke, and then maybe I'll be interested in whatever it is he does end up announcing. So I do just want to say thank you to a few people that have joined the chat. I can see Stubbs Gaming joined earlier. Stubbs Gaming is in the chat. BMG joined a little bit earlier. I think BMG's working today, so I hope you have a good day at work, BMG. We've got Paul AFC in there. We got UK Dazras as well. Want to say happy birthday to Stubbs for yesterday. Happy birthday, mate. I believe it was the big 3-8, I think you said. So congratulations on getting a little bit older, pal. You've got a few years on me yet, but hope you had a wonderful day and your hangover isn't too bad today. But I appreciate birthday celebrations can make the next day a bit rough. So thank you all for joining. Obviously, anyone else that's listening, thank you very much for stopping by. I guess we can keep talking about the Game Awards. Then we'll keep the Game Awards chat going. Obviously, we've got when is it? Is it next Thursday on very early Friday morning for us in the UK? I believe it starts at about 12:30, and there's been a few little bits that have come out. It looks like maybe we'll get a Final Fantasy 16 announcement trailer at the show, or at least the director's turning up at the Game Awards, and I imagine he would only be doing that if he was if he had something to show. Joseph Fares is going to be at the show as well. I think he's just going to be maybe doing an award, but I wonder when we'll see the next game from his studio. And Keeley, maybe he does this every time, but he seems to be fairly optimistic about the show this year, and I think maybe his past couple of shows, like when he's done his AMAs on Reddit beforehand, he's been a little bit hesitant or he's been trying to set expectations a little bit, and he's maybe talked about how he's worried about what they have, and he's dampened expectations somewhat. But he seems to be fairly buoyant about this year's show, so we'll hopefully have a lot to get excited for. So, Pucks, are you looking forward to the show?
Yeah, I always look forward to these shows. Obviously, mainly for the announcements, but I do like watching the actual awards bit and who gets what. And to be fair, I actually quite enjoy going through the list of nominees, and because we're all allowed to vote, aren't we? So I signed in a couple about last week or maybe 2 weeks ago and started putting my vote on most of the categories. The one thing that I always find funny every year, again, this could be appreciate content creators and streamers are our biggest celebrities, especially younger audiences now, right? People on TV, right? But I always look at these things like I feel like I'm pretty pro the gaming community in most strands, but I see these names come up and I just think, who the hell are you? like why are you important? Exactly? What have you done exactly? But no, I am looking forward to the awards, and I do think some of the bigger awards are going to be interesting in terms of like Game of the Year. I think is the big one. We all anticipated that it was probably going to be God of War versus Elden Ring, and lo and behold, as we all probably expected, they made the cut. Alongside, was it Horizon Forbidden West and Stray was on there as well for Game of the Year. I've actually got it up in front of me. Let me quickly open it up. Plague Tale Requiem was on there, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which I thought was quite an interesting one as well.
So apologies, it does seem like we're having some botting issues on audio. Pucks does sound fine to me. OBS. Oh, Stubbs says Pucks is back. Okay, maybe it was just a little glitch in the matrix.
I didn't change anything.
So
I've just moved my mic a little bit closer to me. Maybe that helps.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. It seems like it's fine now. Apologies, Pucks. Continue, mate.
Cool. No, thank you, everybody. Where was I? I kind of have to repeat what I said, I guess. But yeah, looking forward to it. Game of the year overall. Elden Ring versus God of War. To be fair, I know we spoke about this. Was it 2 weeks ago before these all kind of officially came out? But I do think. I mean, I've completed God of War now. By the way, let's go down that stream. I did that about a week and a half ago now. And having completed it, I personally don't think it's going to. I don't think it's worthy of Game of the Year with Elden Ring on the list. I think Elden Ring deserves it after considering all other facets of what the game has done for itself and for the community out there. But I do think it deserves things like the audio design, the storytelling award, and most of those types. I'd be quite interested to think hear what you guys think of that actually. And for me, I'm thinking like Elden Ring because it was one of those, like, again, being a Dark Souls or a Souls game in that typical genre, then, you know, they were very niche to begin with, and always have been. But whether you want to put it down to the younger audience on places like TikTok sharing it and people jumping on the bandwagon, I don't know. But I just think the game seems to have brought so many people together in such a strange way and introduced people to this. What was a niche genre has now become quite a big staple, I think, for a lot of people. And this game seems to be a game that people will remember for a long time coming. But where God of War, as much as I loved it, and it was a fantastic story, nothing could beat the story. But in terms of doing anything bigger or different or anything like that, I just don't think it's on the same level as Elden Ring in that regard, in terms of Game of the Year. I'll be interested to hear what you guys think of that.
Yeah, I guess I'll let Luke answer that because I've not really played either of them, so I can't say. But Luke, obviously, you're now, when you've completed God of War, I think your immediate reaction was my favorite game of the year. Now that we're maybe a couple of weeks sort of past that, are you of the same opinion still at the moment? Has anything changed? Having given a little bit of thought since then?
Yeah, no, it's still the same for me. I think, I mean.
Have you done the votes on the website as well?
Yeah, I did the votes. Yeah, I did the votes, and I mean, Ragnarok was my game of the year vote. I kind of ummed and ahed over Elden Ring as well, and I've not, as I said before, I've not finished Elden Ring, but I am like 32 hours into it, and I'm probably about maybe 15 from actually finishing. You know, the main. Well, 15 if I'm like good. I don't know how long it'll take to actually finish, but I'm not, a million miles away from the end game stuff. So I think like either one is a very worthy game of the year winner. I don't think, like, I'm not in a position where I was in 2018 where there was God of War and there was Red Dead. And I really didn't think Red Dead was a worthy winner of that. And he didn't win, but I really, really, really disliked Red Dead. Elden Ring is amazing, but I'm not like, I don't I agree that Elden Ring did like a great thing for the Souls, Soul genre, but I don't know whether that is relevant to whether something should be Game of the Year. Like, the impact it has, I think, is almost ancillary to, is it the best game this year? Because you can have many games of the year that, maybe don't do a particular thing for their genre. They don't elevate it and bring it to new people and stuff, but they are just amazing games. And Ragnarok kind of falls into that boat where, as you say, it's not doing anything, new in action adventure terms, but it's just very well put together, and it's a superb game. So, I don't like when I'm voting. I mean, people may vote differently, but when I'm voting on what do I think was the best game that I played this year from this list.
Yeah.
Now, luckily this time, I'd played everything except Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So I could give a pretty informed decision about that, subjective one nonetheless. But so yeah, I nothing's changed for me in terms of where I think they are. But maybe I'd finish Elden Ring before the end of the year, and maybe my my thoughts would change. But I don't I don't think so. But I love God of War Ragnarok for different reasons, and I love Elden Ring. It's not really a like for like. It's kind of difficult in a way to evaluate them as against each other because they're just very different games. So really,
it sounds like we've had completely different experiences of it as well. Because would you say you're 36 hours into Elden Ring? Was that right?
Yeah,
like that?
32 or something.
Yeah, because I think for me, I hit like 100 hours plus on it. That's kind of how much I was hooked on it. So I could definitely, I know.
Yeah.
But there, I was doing a lot of exploring. I wasn't just I wasn't just running for the main plot line. I was doing anything and every little secret I was discovering. I would follow up on, and the game is that big,
Yeah, it's
and
massive.
so
yeah,
I completely agree with what you said though. But I think we've definitely had completely different experiences of it by the sounds of it. Or length of time.
Length of time, but I don't think that's even that determinative in terms of whether, once you get 30 hours into a game, I think you can give a pretty good,
I agree.
Thingy. But obviously, for you, maybe it's reflective of how much you love that game as compared to me. Because I got 30 hours in and I was like, this is amazing, but I'm just going to come off because I don't even think I got stuck on anything. I just dropped off. So, and whereas for Ragnarok, I've got more time in that. I've done most of it, but that just hooked me in, and I didn't put it down until I'd done the main story. So, but
do you do
again,
all the side quests as well in Ragnarok out of interest, because I think I just find it in general. I just find it interesting because when I finished the game, I know like the first game, there was a lot of side quests that that unlock post game and post game only, and most of them I followed up on. But I did get to the end, and I did kind of immediately hit this wall in my own head, thinking I've done the game now. I don't really feel like I need or want to do anymore.
No, I mean,
I felt I was done with the game at that point. So it's
I think
a different experience for me.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that's driven by the story element, because once you've done the main story, for some people, there's not that kind of motivation to go and do the other stuff. Because you've done it, the tale has been told. You know what I mean? And then everything else is just additional to that. I did a lot of the side stuff after the main story because I just really love the gameplay loop, like the combat loop and stuff. So that's kind of why I was motivated to do it. Obviously there's end game story elements to that as well. But it's different strokes, isn't it? I mean, it's just a bit different. And I mean, I don't know which one will win Game of the Year. If I were to hazard a guess, I think Elden Ring will probably do it. And it would be super well deserved if it does. I mean, it's an amazing game. One of the best ever made. But I'd say that about Ragnarok as well. So
I'm on the exact same boat, despite what I've just said. I agree that either one deserves it.
Yeah, either one deserves it. And I think, as you say, if one of them doesn't win Game of the Year, I'd hope it would at least, sweep up other awards as well. Because they're both, I think pretty much for every category they're nominated for, they're probably the best at everything in those categories. So
I do feel sorry when I look at some of the categories, when you see, there's one here for Best Narrative. So God of War was obviously my vote for this one, but there's Plague's Tale, Elden Ring, God of War, Forbidden West, and then a game called Immortality as well, which I don't think I've even heard of.
You missed our show 2 weeks ago, actually, didn't you, Pox? Just remembered, because it was me, Luke, and Indy when you couldn't make it, and we were swooning over Immortality.
Immortality might have the best narrative this year, actually. So,
really? Okay.
Yeah, it's probably
I've not even heard of this game. Where have I been? Because I looked at it comparing that to a game I've not heard of to these other ones. I thought, why would that win? But maybe it wouldn't, given what you've just said. I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably it's really close between that and God of War. So.
Yeah.
Is it on Game Pass, or is it is it an indie game?
No, it's on Game Pass. It's on Game Pass. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
It's did you play? What's the director's name? Sam Barlow. That's right, isn't it? Have you played Her Story or Christ? What was the one that I also played earlier? Telling Lies. That was the other one that I played this year as well.
No, I haven't.
check it out, Pucks. It's not massively long. I don't think, what is it, like 6 hours? Does that sound about right, Luke?
About 6 hours, maybe 5 or 6.
But definitely worth your time.
It's very unique. Very unique, and probably if we don't tell you anything, it actually will add to your experience.
Yeah.
So go and check it out, because it may change your opinion of best narrative. But it's I think I still gave it to Ragnarok overall, because I think that's more emotionally affecting than Immortality is. But Immortality's maybe like a more I don't really know how to describe it. Like
I'll just quickly look at some of the screenshots.
More
on
interesting
the Game Pass
story.
Website. Yeah, and it's like the whole real people acting kind of gameplay or something.
Yeah.
Okay, it's FMV based.
Yeah, sure.
It's really good.
Yeah, I really do hope that Immortality picks up at least one award.
It should do.
Even if it's just Man Engaged getting like best performance or something like that. I really hope that picks up at least one. I think it definitely deserves it. But I think you mentioned during the last show that maybe it's a game that'll probably sweep up at some of the other award shows that'll happen next year. But I do hope it gets recognized this year. But look, I was meaning to ask, you have been playing a little bit more Plague Tale, haven't you?
Yep.
How have you managed to get towards the end of that yet?
Not yet, no. So I have played more. I've played a couple of hours more, but I don't think I'm. How many chapters does it have? It's like 18 or something, isn't it?
It's 17, but 17's kind of like it's like the end of 16 is kind of the end of the story, and then the 17's not much.
Yes. So I think I'm on like 10.
Oh, okay. Oh, man,
11.
you're so close to the bit
really
where it just
close,
gets really good as well. Because it's like chapter 11, 12, where in my opinion the game just really shines. So I'm still excited to speak to you about that when you get to that point. So
I will definitely finish it before the end of the year, because it's really good.
Yeah, I think we'll probably do like a game of the year show ourselves, but we'll probably do it in January. It might be like our first show of next year. Obviously gives us time to catch up on some of those games that we haven't played over the festive period, and then we can maybe if everyone's had a chance to play a few of those games, we can have a little bit of a chat about them. So I think this will probably be, or the game that we've got on screen at the moment will probably be high on a lot of people's lists this year. Vampire Survivors. It's kind of taken the world by storm a little bit. It seems. I do need to play a little bit more of it to be honest. I kind of dropped it a little bit because the Reapers kept kicking my ass, but yeah, I'll have to get back to that. So, but do you guys have any sort of I was going to say dream announcements, whether you want to call them dream announcements or not, but anything that maybe you're hoping they'll show up at the Game Awards in terms of announcements, obviously.
I feel like
Death Stranding 2.
Well, that's one.
I reckon Kojima's going to turn up and he's going to announce all 3 of those games and a second podcast.
I was going to say, and another podcast. And a book.
And a movie. There's definitely going to be a movie there. He's going to just have like an announcement every 20 minutes throughout the show. So, but yeah, anything in particular that stands out that you would not necessarily expect to turn up, but anything you would really like to see? Because obviously this is a big show. It's one of the biggest of the year, so it is an opportunity for some studios to get out. Obviously, Sony haven't had a big showcase this year, and it doesn't look like they're gonna have one. Xbox have shown up big at the previous Game Awards with Perfect Dark and Hellblade 2 and things like that. So anything you guys are expecting to show up?
Off the top of my head, I think it'd be quite interesting if we saw like some Fable gameplay.
Yes.
A reveal of that kind of nature. That'd be quite interesting. I feel like it's been long enough.
Yeah, I would love that, Pucks. I think from Xbox, if they're going to show a different game to one that they've already shown at the Game Awards, sorry, I should say, I'm kind of thinking it'll be Avowed.
Yeah.
That'd be a good one as well.
Yeah. I honestly think Fable's probably still a little way off, unfortunately, where like if we hadn't seen Fable yet, as in the initial CG announcement trailer, then I would maybe think, yes, this would be a place that they would show that. But because we've seen that, I don't know if they're going to have like anything sufficient to show it just yet, at least. I might be wrong, but I kind of get a sense that that's maybe at least like 2 years out still at this point, so maybe it's a bit soon. But yeah, I'm thinking from Xbox, maybe Avowed, because I think that might drop late next year, so maybe this would be a good time to show off a little bit more. But
be nice to see it.
Yeah,
yeah. Fable would be the dream, but yeah, unlikely. Avowed's more likely. Please not Hellblade 2 again.
Yeah, I know.
I don't need to see anything else.
Yeah.
We don't want to cross into Deathloop / Oddworld, Soulstone realms of showing it multiple times. You just don't need to either with Hellblade, because you know what you're going to get out of it. It looks great. So
yeah, I think what they've shown is almost the perfect amount.
Yeah,
now
that's the perfect amount.
It's got people excited.
Yeah. Do a story trailer closer to launch, and then that's it. So yeah, Fable would be great. Avowed is probably most likely, although I'm really excited to see that. So if it is there, that would be great.
Oh yeah, same. It's one of my most anticipated games. From Xbox at the moment, Avowed actually. So yeah, I'll be definitely really pleased to see that.
And then from Sony, I don't know if Death Stranding 2's there, is it exclusive to PlayStation? Probably.
Yeah.
Because they probably have the IP. So maybe that would be it. And obviously 16 is going to be there, which is not a first party game, but it's close enough, I think, for Sony. So maybe that would be it. I don't know. I would like to see something else, but Last of Us Factions 2, that's not going to be there because Naughty Dog already said they're going to show that next year. There'll be a big update then, so not going to be there. Can't think of anything. Maybe
Spider-Man 2.
Spider-Man, maybe.
That's meant to be out next year, isn't it?
Yeah.
For 2023.
So I just don't know what their plans are for a showcase. Like whether they'll do. Obviously, they're not going to do one this year now, but do they have one around the corner next year? I don't know. Nobody really knows. So it's kind of difficult to judge what they're going to show and what they aren't.
Yeah.
So.
Do you reckon we'll see any more Wolverine? Speaking of Marvel stuff as well.
No, I think it's probably a bit too early yet.
You think?
Yeah. I think we'll see Spider-Man 2 first, won't we? And then
yeah. They'll concentrate on that, and then they'll show a bit more Wolverine.
Anything from Nintendo? Do you think we'll see Tears of the Kingdom?
Metroid Prime 4. Will we finally see some Prime 4?
That game doesn't exist, Pucks. It's just
you don't think?
No, it's. Well, I mean, it obviously does, but I don't know.
You reckon it's been silently killed?
No, definitely not.
It's going to come out, but I don't know if they're going to show it here. I think we'll get that. I think we'll finally get that next year, as in a proper re-reveal.
Yeah,
not even a re-reveal, a reveal of the game.
It got completely rebooted, didn't it? So I guess it would be quite literally a re-reveal.
Well, they'd only showed off the bloody logo to begin with.
So
they
didn't have anything to reveal.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know. Nintendo last year, I don't think they had really much. No. I think they were pretty.
The last few years has mainly been Smash Bros DLC characters. That's kind of been the big thing, but that's all done now. So
yeah. They did show Breath of the Wild though at a previous year's Game Awards, didn't they? So it's not out of the realm's possibility. So I wouldn't expect them to announce the next Mario game, for example, at the Game Awards.
No, I was thinking about that as well. I was like, we need that.
Yeah, I mean, Odyssey was what 3-4 years ago now?
2017.
Holy shit, 5 years ago, yeah.
It's when the Switch came out,
yeah. It's because they don't want to compete against Sonic Frontiers, so we can't let's just wait for all the love for that game. Did you see that? I think Frontiers is winning the fan vote for the player's choice.
People love it, yeah.
I think that's an ironic vote, though, isn't it? More than anything.
Yeah.
Although Stubbs in the chat, I know he's been enjoying it. I did put a tweet out asking people what gameplay they want showed, and Stubbs did request Sonic Frontiers. I haven't bought it though, Stubbs. So, like I said, if you want Sonic Frontiers featured on the show, feel free to capture some gameplay footage. I'm more than happy to showcase it on a future show. But I mean, Halo Infinite won the Player's Choice last year, if I remember correctly, which was, I think that's just fanboys voting last year, and then I think this year it's just it's just irony, and that's making people vote for that. So.
Even Sonic Frontiers, though, I mean, Sega even released like a proper roadmap of free DLC and that they're bringing out, like in 3 big updates. It's quite insane.
Yeah, I mean,
all extra playable characters, new zones, new things to do.
It seems to have done okay. Like it did well in the UK box charts at the very least. From what I remember reading, it was discounted over Black Friday and was one of the best-selling games over Black Friday, I believe. Obviously, they've got this roadmap. I mean, it didn't review amazingly well, but for a 3D Sonic game, I think it reviewed quite well. So I think they've done okay with it. I honestly think the biggest issue with Sonic Frontiers was just how they revealed it. They made a complete arse of the reveal of the game to exclude some of like the key parts of the game, which give people, I think, like a really bad impression of it to begin with. It was just this empty open world with literally nothing in it. And I think that kind of has stuck a little bit. But yeah, we do have Mario at some point to come, but maybe that'll be next year. Maybe that'll be like their E3's time, whatever they end up doing in the summer, sort of direct. Because at that point, Tears of the Kingdom's out.
Yeah.
So they don't have to worry about those two games like competing with each other, I guess, in a weird way. So maybe that'll be then.
Part of me is wondering as well if are Nintendo working on a new Mario Kart? Is Mario Kart 9 a thing, or are they just going to keep stringing along Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for the longest time? I suppose that all the time they've got this DLC pack courses, all the DLC tracks coming out over, I think it's up until the end of next year, I believe.
Yeah.
When all these tracks come out. So I guess, and now I've said it out loud, I'm thinking, actually, no, it's probably way off.
Nah, and it's still like in the top 10 MPDs in the States
it's crazy.
Every month, or at least the top 20, which is bonkers. Like, it's sold like almost 50 million copies, I believe, now.
I think it's quite periodically in the UK charts as well, like top 10 all the time.
It's crackers how well that game is sold, especially considering it's just effectively a port. Of the
some
Wii
extra
U
tracks
game,
and
so.
some slight changes here and there. That's all it is, but it is a great game. I love it, to be fair. But even someone like big fan like myself, I'm ready for the next installment now. But then again, that's because I've played it since years. So
Yeah.
So people like me are ready for it, but I appreciate that all the new players joining it's all they know and love, I guess. So. And Mario Kart Tour is actually doing surprisingly well still, believe it or not. So I think I read something a while back that Nintendo see Mario Kart Tour as their Mario Kart 9 or something to that effect. Because of how they basically treat the mobile one as the next mainline game, because that's how well it's doing, and it's insane to hear. And it's like, yeah, but it's not like it's very well put together. And I do enjoy it myself, but it's just not the same as having a proper controller experience,
Yeah. I mean, there are Mario Kart Tour tracks in this Mario Kart 8 DLC as well, isn't there? If I remember rightly.
Yes, there are. Yeah.
So
and there's the previous courses have released other ones as well. So
yeah,
I'm trying to think of maybe what else. Was there anything else from Sony, Luke, that you think might make an appearance? Do you think Sony will make an appearance in terms of announcements? I guess I should say, like first party wise.
Legacy of Kain reveal.
Yeah, in our dreams. Well, maybe one day. I think, but I just think if they are there, that it's just going to be Death Stranding 2.
Yeah,
and Final Fantasy 16. I think that's them, if you want to call that them. So, yeah, I don't think there will be anything above that, in terms of, some first party studio revealing something. I think it's, Kojima Productions and Square, basically.
Yeah.
Which would be a shame. Well, I mean, it wouldn't be for me. It'd be great to see Death Stranding 2, and I'm looking forward to 16 anyway. But, I don't think anything else apart from that.
Yeah, I mean, and to be fair, as you say, if I know they're not first party, but from a exclusive perspective, if they show Death Stranding 2 and Final Fantasy 16, that's still a bloody good show for a third party show. So so it'll be interesting to see what it is. That's, like I say, that's next Thursday. I think it starts at midnight Friday morning for us in the UK. I'm still debating whether I'm staying up to watch it. It's one of those things where I really, really want it. It's just so fucking late. So
Keely did say, he said the show's shorter this
year. That's good.
That's a bit more. And he said it was shorter, and he said fewer games, and he seemed to, you can take his language two ways, because he said something about fewer bigger games, but some people, the way he wrote that on Reddit was a bit strange. So he might just mean there's fewer games, but they're bigger games, or there's fewer games and there's fewer big games. But I don't know why you would say that, because it kind of dampens the hype if there's fewer. Like, fewer games isn't an issue, but fewer bigger games is kind of like an issue. But then he said I know it's Keely, so he's going to hype it up, but he said he was really excited about it, didn't he, the show? So but compared to the last few, so
and I think Keely in the past has overhyped his shows, but I think it was even maybe this Summer Games Fest. I think he sounded fairly downbeat. Ahead of the show.
Actually,
which
ended up being a really good show as well. It was really strange, because I remember thinking not being excited, and then I was like, oh, that was actually quite good.
I think that kind of just, it's the whole expectations thing, and we spoke about any show in the past. If your expectations are sky high, it's it's going to be difficult to meet them. But I think in the past he has been guilty of overhyping things, and I think he's got a little bit better actually of setting appropriate expectations, and like I say, he seems to be fairly upbeat on this show, so
I look forward to it.
It should be good. So is it worth jumping into the Callisto Protocol now then Luke? Obviously, I guess the big release of the week came out Thursday or Friday, I can't remember exactly when. A bit of a red flag, I think, for a lot of people was the review embargo was on the day of release, which I think is always maybe a bit of a bad sign. I think it's sitting at like mid to high 70s last time I looked, like 76 on Metacritic, OpenCritic, that sort of thing. If you care about those, but I think a lot of the issues with it seem to stem from technical or performance issues, and obviously you've had some first-hand experience of it, Luke, so do you want to maybe talk us through what your thoughts are so far?
It's been a bit of a roller coaster with it, actually, because so it released on Friday. As I said, the review embargo also went up the same day, which is a bit of a red flag. I mean, sometimes it's not, because sometimes it's just weird reasons for that, and then games come out and review really well. For this one, I don't know if it was intended to prevent people from realizing the performance issues or what, but it was quite strange. I preloaded it on PC, and then I played it Friday morning, because I had a day off, coincidentally, and initial impressions are pretty good, actually. Well, kind of. In terms of performance, at least, the opening segment ran pretty well, generally, and that was at native 4K, everything max, all the ray tracing max, etc. Now, it doesn't have DLSS because it's an AMD title. I think they will patch it in, because they usually patch it in pretty quickly. It has FSR 2.0. And like people know my rig 4090 3900K, so I was getting in the main area sort of 70 to 110 frames, like anywhere in that range, which is pretty good. Like it's not like, I mean, obviously it's very good in 84K with all the RT stuff, but you kind of expect a bit more. Obviously, usually DLSS is the thing that gives you your big boost. FSR didn't. I felt there was something wrong, because FSR wasn't really having much of an impact. unless you put it in ultra performance mode, and then the image quality just is terrible. Like, it's just not worth doing that. Even in quality mode, actually, FSR is not very good. I don't know why people would choose that over DLSS if you have the choice, because obviously if you've got if you've only got an AMD card, then that's why. But so that was concerning, but I was like, okay, performance is bad. Then I got to the kind of main area, the kind of the game really begins, and then performance dropped. So I was getting kind of just above 60 FPS, like 65. Sometimes it would go up to about 80 and stuff like that. But again, with the hardware involved, that's not amazing. But the biggest issue on PC was the stutter stuff, which was right from the beginning, which is just terrible. I mean, just really, really bad. It would just suddenly stutter and lurch, and obviously when it stutters, the frames drop to like 15 FPS for a second or two. And it would do that kind of very randomly, but also quite often. And it would do it to such an extent that it would kind of throw you out of the game. So there's quite a famous example. There's near the start of the game, you walk past a pipe and the pipe bursts to give you a jump scare. But you would go past the pipe would burst, the audio would go off, but the stutter was so massive that you just, like, the screen would freeze, and then you'd just come back and then the pipe would be already burst, like, because it would just happen. So there was stuff like that, and every time some new element of the game is introduced, you get a pretty big stutter, and that's all from Unreal Engine shader compilation, basically. In that it was compiling its the engine compiles its shaders as it goes along. You actually have to change that when you're developing it, and if you don't, you get stutters. So that was a PC version. So I refunded it, which is a shame, because actually what I played when it wasn't stuttering, I really enjoyed. Now they've now done a patch. So I actually bought it again yesterday. Because I was like, I'll give it a chance. And the patch on PC has pretty much fixed most of the stuttering, which is good, really good, because that was the main issue. It still doesn't perform as well as I would like. And, there are areas I'm in the game now where I'm getting sub 60 FPS. Again, I don't think that's really acceptable given the hardware. And it's a weird game because it's not using the full amount of my GPU. It's really CPU bound as well. So it's like, as a PC port generally, it's not great. And there's also some like major annoyances that I have, which is stuff like when you're playing. Well, there's actually two. One is the technical point. One's just a baffling decision. But the technical point is that when you're playing the game on PC, you can't change any graphical settings in game. You can only change your resolution if you've got HDR on, which means that if you want to benchmark, if you want to be like, oh, what impact does this thing have on my frames, you can't do that. You have to quit to the main menu, go and select it, and then continue the game. That's really weird. The second thing, which is not a technical point, but it's the save system. It's the most bizarre save system I've ever seen in my life. So the game checkpoints you, and then it tells you when you go to save the game how far your last checkpoint was. So say I've been checkpointed in the game, cool, and then play for 5 minutes, bring up the menu to save. It says my last checkpoint was 5 minutes ago. Okay, great. I want to do a manual save. A manual save, it doesn't do anything. I don't know what the point of the save is. It just takes you back to the checkpoint when you reload the game, even if you continue off the manual save. So, it's the most bizarre system I've ever seen. I think all the save does is it will save the items that you've accumulated, effectively, in that, let's say, that 5 minutes after a checkpoint. It's just stuff like this that's like, who was thinking of this when they did the game?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, when they were playtesting, who thought this was a good idea?
I'm trying to think of any other games that have done that. No, it is. Look, I think, if I remember rightly, I don't think you can save the game, but I think Pentiment has maybe something similar. Is it Pentiment? Where I wanted to save the game, and you can't save the game, but when you go to return to main menu, it might not be Pentiment. I think it might be a different game, but it tells you how far away from the last checkpoint it is. And then, well, I've now got the option of playing until the next checkpoint or losing the past 5 or 6 minutes of gameplay that I've played, which really pissed us off a little bit.
It's really weird. It's very strange. But so those are the negatives. Which are really bad. Now, obviously, I think people have seen the console performance stuff. So the PS5 version's really good. Clearly, that was the lead console. That has a really good ray traced 30 FPS quality mode and then a performance mode, all of which are pretty flawless, effectively. The series consoles, I know the performance mode for the X is apparently very good, but the quality mode is shite, essentially, for series consoles. I think both. It doesn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but I think it doesn't have the proper ray trace reflection stuff, which is kind of negative number one. And even without that, it runs like crap. Like it drops into the low 20s.
So the Digital Foundry report basically, so I think it's got ray trace shadows, but not reflections.
Yes, but not reflections,
The PlayStation 5 has both shadows and reflections. And yet, despite that, the Xbox version dips to like 21, 22 FPS in certain areas, which... in my opinion, in this day and age, is genuinely unacceptable. Like, I can accept a really polished, fantastic looking 30 FPS game. For example, Plague Tale. I played Plague Tale at 30 FPS, and while I prefer 60, I was happy to play that because the game is just beautiful to look at. But if it had dips going into the low 20s, in my opinion, it just... that's not acceptable. I mean, at least it does have the performance mode, which, as you say, does seem to be fine. But to have fewer features and run significantly worse in quality, I think, in my opinion, is unacceptable. Unfortunately,
Yeah, I agree. It's weird. So hopefully they get that sorted. Obviously, they were on the PC version really quickly with the stutter stuff, which is great. They still have work to do there. And they still have optimization work they need to do on the PC version and the Series version, clearly, because I suspect maybe the reflection thing on the Series X is a bug, because I've seen some Series X games and some PlayStation 5 games before that haven't, like, one version has had ray tracing enabled and then the other randomly hasn't.
Yeah.
And then they patch it in and then they're like, sorry, that was a bug. Like we didn't mean it to not have this ray tracing feature. So we'll see how that goes. But I guess in terms of positives, there are positives about it, which is that first of all, it's one of the best looking games that has been released. It is an amazing looking game. They have done really well with that. The level of detail everywhere is incredible. The lighting in particular is really, really, really good. The ray tracing stuff, the shadow stuff is actually probably more impressive than the reflection stuff. The reflection stuff is nice, it's good, but it's a bit low res in terms of the level of reflection. But the shadows are like, I think every light casts like a proper light source, and then you get a proper shadow source as well. So it's really impressive, and it's like the character models in this game are just bonkers good. Like they're ridiculously good in game. They're probably the best character models I've ever seen in a game.
Did you see that side by side of the photograph and the in-game render?
Yeah,
genuinely,
it's crazy.
If someone just showed me that, I couldn't tell the difference. It is absolutely crackers how good that in-game render of the guy was. I couldn't believe what I was looking at, to be honest.
Yeah, it's. I'll try and post some screenshots on Twitter of some of this stuff because it's really amazing. Like I think everybody's used to like some games having really great in-game models, but not every game does. I mean, I think like maybe Horizon Forbidden West had amazing in-game models. This is like as good, if not better, than Horizon Forbidden West in terms of its in-game character models. And it helps with immersion as a result. It's really, really great when you're controlling the character, Jacob, and then like he'll he'll like turn around, like he'll turn his head to look behind him, as if there's something there, and it's just so realistic looking. And the interplay with the lighting on that is really cool. So that's great. So it's really good. The audio is also amazing. It's really good. The sounds typically, like you would expect this, I guess, from the creator of Dead Space, but the soundstage is really excellent. And so you get this very kind of multiple sound sources coming from many different directions, which is really nice. And that heightens the tension a bit. And the atmosphere generally is really good in the game. What I will say is that it's not scary, really. At least not so far. Like, I know it's a horror game. I like it's not even unsettling, really. The horror is more in the gore elements of it.
Yeah.
Not in terms of kind of the dread of something like Alien Isolation or even the original Dead Space or anything like that. It likes jump scares, so if you're particularly averse to them, then you probably won't like this. But it's a different type of game. But I'm enjoying it. Like, I think it's good. It's definitely good. It's not the new Dead Space by any stretch, but it's good. Like I said, visually great, audio's great. The atmosphere is very good, albeit it's not horrifying. The story's pretty interesting so far, a little bit different. Animations are great. The combat is interesting.
That was the one thing I wanted to talk to you about, actually, because what you said sounded like I couldn't. The way you described it in Discord, I couldn't understand how that worked. Yeah. But there was a lot of criticisms in the reviews regarding the combat. So where do you land on it?
I think the combat's good, but it takes... Well, it's good and bad. So it's... For people that don't know, there's a lot of melee in the game, because it's a survival horror game and they don't want you to have weapons too much. So I've just recently got a weapon in the game, actually. And I will say I really like the gunplay in this. I think the enemies can be a bit spongy sometimes, but that's, for survival horror purposes, I guess, much like Resident Evil. But it's, it's quite nice. The melee is really interesting. So you can dodge in this game and you can block when you're meleeing, and all of those functions are mapped to the left stick if you're playing on controller. I don't think you have this problem as such if you're on keyboard and mouse, but and the way it works is when an enemy comes to swing at you, if you're holding left or right on your thumbstick, your character will dodge. So that's pretty straightforward. It is a bit weird because obviously you're also using the left stick to control your character to move. But it kind of... Something happens in the background of the engine when enemies are on screen to kind of help with that. Like, it's not as if it moves for you, but the areas are so contained. Like, the way that you have to fight is kind of really upfront, like really close and personal. And it's not as if you're like... It's not like Ragnarok, right, where you're like rolling everywhere and you've got quite a wide play area, and then if you hold back on your thumbstick it will block, but when you're dodging, let's say you dodge left, for you to have a successful dodge the next time you have to put your thumbstick to the right, and vice versa. You have to alternate, otherwise it will fail the block. So it's like a nuance to learn. And then the problem with it is when you have multiple enemies on screen, because you have to do things like, let's say enemy 1 attacks you and you dodge left. You have to then remember, if enemy 2 is coming to get you, it's the same sequence of dodge. So you have to dodge right to get a dodge.
So you couldn't dodge left for the second enemy, even if like technically that's a viable, even if the space to the left, you couldn't dodge left because... No. Okay, that's interesting.
Because the dodge is more like it's not like he jumps. It's more like I'll just, like, I'm stood in place, but I move to the side slightly,
right.
A twist off. So that's what you do, and you have to remember those things when you're engaged in combat. So it takes a lot of getting used to. I quite like it, but I can see it is not intuitive at all, and it takes a number of hours to actually get used to it. And I don't see why they couldn't have just mapped the dodge to a button. It would have been a lot simpler.
I'm assuming there's buttons free as well. If block, dodge, and move is on one stick, then I imagine there's at least a face button or a shoulder button that technically could be used.
B is free all the time, pretty much. So you could have done it on that, and you maybe just hold left and then press B or whatever, or just press B generally, and you have to time it. Like, it could have been a bit better than that. So a bit strange. And then there's the I've just unlocked the gravity gun, which is really cool. You can pick up enemies, pick up objects, throw enemies, throw objects. So it's this weird game, basically, is my summary of, like, I think there's a lot of good things about it, and most of that is wrapped up in production, rather than, gameplay, which sounds pretty bad, but it's not as if the gameplay is, like, garbage. It's not. It's just different, and they've made some choices that I think will not be for everyone. And I think if they'd made different choices, maybe the review scores would have been, not that it's a low review score, but it would have been higher. So sorry, I know that's probably that's basically a full review of what I've played so far, but hopefully that's somewhat illuminating as to my thoughts on it, and I'd be interested to see what other people have thought from what they've seen or played.
Yeah, Pox, does that encourage you to check the game out of interest? How are you feeling after hearing Luke's thoughts?
I'm probably not going to be jumping into the game anytime soon. Is probably the very quick answer.
Yeah.
If anything, I'm probably more encouraged to just go back and play the original Dead Space instead.
Well, that's a question for you, Ball. So it's obvious that this game just needed. I mean, look, you could say this about every bloody title that's released these days, but it seems that the game needed a little bit more time in the oven. But, you could apply that to pretty much any game, particularly AAA game that's released. Even the smaller games, we spoke about it just a couple of weeks ago. Somerville probably need a little bit more time in the oven. But I guess a lot of other games don't have a direct competitor in the form of Dead Space coming out just a few weeks afterwards. So do you think, Luke, that if Dead Space wasn't coming out in January, that this game might have maybe being given a little bit more time? Because obviously they got the patch out the same day, so they were obviously working on this patch beforehand. They had a day one patch. They obviously had a second one that came out on day one as well. I think they have patched the Xbox version as well since, within a couple of days. So it's obvious that they were aware of the issues and made the decision to release it anyway. And there were rumors, I can't remember, maybe a month or two ago, that it was going to be delayed until February. If I remember rightly, those rumors were around, and they came out, and because it was around the time of Gotham Knights getting panned a little bit, because they came out and said, no, it's still come out in December. Oh, and by the way, we've got a 60 FPS mode, if I remember rightly, which is funny that they were bragging about that when it comes out and it's got all these technical problems, but hey-ho. But yeah, do you think it would have been given a bit more time if Dead Space wasn't coming out so soon?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think maybe that influenced them somewhat. Obviously, this was touted as sort of a spiritual successor to it. So I think they wanted to ride off the back of that before, Dead Space Remake came out, which equally looks amazing. And I suspect will run a lot better day one than this did. Mainly because it's not using Unreal Engine, at least. Maybe that came to their mind. I just some weird decisions for this game, and it could have just used even if they pushed it back 2 weeks, like that probably would have been enough,
or even 3 days.
Yeah,
considering they've had patches out. Yeah, like they just pushed it to Tuesday or coming Thursday.
Yeah, like just a little bit would have seeming. I mean, you would have at least then had no stutters day one. I think it was. I saw something from Glenn Schofield about the PC version and about that patch, which he said something like it was a mistake. like the way that the shaders were compiled for launch was not meant to be that way, and this patch was merely updating what they'd already done, but then accidentally released the wrong thing.
Okay.
So like that, I thought that was quite interesting. It was like it was a legit error. So I was like, okay, fine. I mean, that doesn't make up for the other performance problems on PC and also the console versions, but at least the stutter element is better. But yeah, it was just a couple, like just a bit of extra time just for polish, just for performance polish. I mean, it's no, like it's a phenomenal looking game, but it just runs weirdly. I don't understand it. And also, like, I'm just for PC stuff, like stutter issues are just really prevalent at the moment, and it's really ruining some of the PC experience when you have games that come out that are using Unreal Engine, and then they have this same issue all the time with stutters. And then I'm also just like, people just need to put DLSS in everything. It just needs to be like a default mode, because it just makes everything better, and FSR is terrible. It's just absolutely terrible by comparison. So weird one. Hopefully they get that Xbox quality version fixed.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, because I don't think there's an excuse for PC issues aside. I don't think there's any excuse for one console version of the game to be that much worse than the other. Like, fair enough, and there's going to be a lead platform for development, but you need to factor that into your development schedule for optimization on any other versions of the game. So hopefully they get it fixed. I mean, we should probably, some context, this is their first game, I believe.
Yeah.
And from what they've produced, it seems to be quite an achievement for a debut game. Technical issues aside, and I suspect the date was kind of out of their hands. I believe it was published by Crafton. So, it's not necessarily the developer's fault with a lot of these things. It's often, taken out of their hands, but still, it's just a bit of a shame, because there's been a lot of excitement for the game. And then I've seen a lot of people, unfortunately, in your case, you even refunded the game initially. It was that bad, and other people have just said, look, it's not good enough, which is a massive shame. Massive shame. So, yeah. Pucks, are you going to be checking out Dead Space in January then, if you're not going to be checking this out, do you think?
I think I was more inclined to check that out than I was Callisto Protocol after what I'd read about it, and especially after now what I've heard. If anything, one of the things I was thinking about is, again, I know these kind of discussions happen all the time, and I know it's not just black and white, but part of me, when I hear stories like this, I do wonder if, are games like this just relying so much on having this fantastic visual fidelity to them, like graphically, asset-wise, the general quality, because, there's no denying that the quality of the game in terms of how it visually looks is impressive. And a lot of people are saying online, at least what I've read, that it feels like the first kind of definition of a truly next-gen experience, even though I believe the game is available on past platforms, I believe. But people are saying graphically that this game looks phenomenal. But then little issues like this and certain like gameplay stuff, which just doesn't always quite tie up, it does make me wonder if, is too much emphasis, like in more modern times now, just focused on a game needs to visually look good rather than just the gameplay. Like, it seems to be, I think it's not as easy as it sounds, I know that, but should there be more emphasis on just making sure the gameplay loop is more fun and refined rather than, I think I'd rather a game look less visually impressive if the gameplay was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, take Vampire Survivors, right? I appreciate it's a completely different league of game, but like, it's simple graphics in comparison to something like Callisto Protocol, but the gameplay loop is that much fun that you just jump in and out of it again and again with minimal complaints. But
I've got complaints about Vampire Survivors.
Sorry?
I've got complaints about Vampire Survivors. As you can see from the video, it doesn't fucking fit to the screen properly. You never go full screen on my monitor. It takes up 3/4 of the screen and not the full bloody screen. It pisses me off so much that when I was trying it, also for some reason the video broadcast doesn't recognize it as a game. So this footage was taken from, I think I had to put it into OBS and then record through OBS, when normally I'm just using video broadcast. I mean, those are minor epics to be fair, but I think there's an element of that, Pucks. But since the dawn of time, graphics of pushing the graphics forward has been part of AAA game development.
Of course, I appreciate that's important,
So,
but there's still a balance to be made, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, in an ideal world, games would look beautiful and run perfectly. But I guess the optimization piece of game development is the bit that comes towards the end, where performance is optimized. So
when I suppose if you think back, when graphical fidelity and quality was, we were going from 2D pixels to 3D polygons for the first time. That's obviously a big leap in itself, and we've come a long way since then. So I appreciate there's all that tech is being pushed to make that as good as it can be up until this point, where 2022 and beyond, it's kind of, I don't know about you guys, but I find it difficult to kind of see how much you improve it from here in terms of how it visually looks from a I appreciate, behind the scenes in the background, you make things like fog look better, water look better, more realistic simulation, etc., etc. But then you could argue that equally for a game, those things don't have to be fully realistic to be convincing, and that's kind of like a key pillar of making games, right? It's making something believable but as simple as possible. But then where we are, I agree, since the dawn of time it's been a thing and pushing graphical fidelity, but again, maybe it's just my nostalgic rose-tinted glasses speaking at the moment, but it feels like there are a lot of, obviously there's a lot of shite back in the past, don't get me wrong, I appreciate there's a lot of trash out there, but equally there's a load of games which weren't graphically as good even to past standards, but still stood the test of time because of how good the gameplay was. But to have something that looks really realistic now is great, but where else do you go? Like, do you focus on just making things look graphically better? Because again, because how far can you go now? Like, Callisto Protocol, I think, is a perfect example of unreal meta-human tech, what they call it. Well, you can even see the sweat beads on his face, for Christ's sake. I mean, that is impressive, don't get me wrong, but where do you go from there, and how far do you focus on that and not try to develop your gameplay further, if that makes sense?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't
appreciate
think
it's a massive hypothetical, but
yeah. But I don't think in this case, I don't think they would looked at the game and were like, we want to make the most photorealistic, amazing looking game we can, and we'll kind of just treat gameplay as ancillary to that. I don't think that's the issue, because gameplay, yes, it has some gameplay issues, but many games have gameplay issues, which for one reason or another, some people think it's a good idea when they're developing the game, and then they release, and players at large are like, actually, this doesn't work.
Yeah, and gameplay stuff's often subjective.
Yeah,
as well.
Anyway,
and technical issues are, objective. If the frame rate's shit, the frame rate's shit. Someone can't.
Exactly.
I guess different people perceive technical issues different to others. Like things like screen tearing, some people just don't see it, other people do. But I think,
see it all the time.
Yeah, I used to be one of those people, Luke, and then I don't know what happened a few years back, and when I really noticed it, and now it's so obvious when it happens. Like it's, I can't unsee it. But sorry, I interrupted though, mate. Continue.
No. But I think in this case, it's just, and in other cases, the problem has been that the games are coming in so hot that they end up having these really bad launches or bad technical issues that could have been resolved by just giving the game more time. And it would have been better for the game, if people had just experienced, a polished game. Like if you look at Cyberpunk now, especially on consoles. I mean, PC
record
was
sales
also
recently, isn't it, or something?
yeah. But if you go to the game now, and let's take the PC version as an example. I got the PC version of that day one. There were gameplay issues with Cyberpunk, but the bigger issue was the performance of that game and the amount of glitches and bugs, which just took you out of the experience entirely. Now you go to it, it's super polished, it runs incredibly well. And whoever's coming to that game new will be like, they won't get what the fuss was about at the time, because they'll be like, it's great. There's no glitches or very little, there's no bugs. It performs really well. And, with Callisto, the problem is it's coming so hot, particularly on PC, that it just, it just completely messes up the launch. It then gets a barrage of deserved negative reviews on Steam. And the developers have to then scramble to, fix the game. And to some extent, like they've done pretty well on Callisto, because even if you look at the Steam reviews, they've gone from like really negative to now mixed, since they brought out the patch, which is good. But there's just this problem of optimization of games at the moment. We've seen it like everywhere. I mean, even Gotham Knights recently as well, across every platform. I mean, even a 4090 and a 3900K can't hold 60 FPS on that game on PC, which is just ludicrous, just absolutely bonkers. And it just 30 FPS everywhere else, and not even a good 30 at times. Like these games are coming in way too hot, and they need to not, basically. Like you need to give the time to the polish, because it can't be good for developers, and it's certainly not good for consumers that we're the game releases and then it's like, yeah, but it's not going to be kind of ready until like 3-4 weeks from now, because we need to actually fix all the issues that it's launched with. That works maybe for early access multiplayer games and stuff like that, where that's being tested, but not for full price single player releases. Like it's just not acceptable stuff in this day and age. So
yeah. But how many times have we had this conversation?
Yeah,
we have it multiple times a year. Often, it's the second time we've had. And when I say we, I mean collectively as a community, not necessarily us. Yeah. But you mentioned Gotham Knights as another example. Going back to something like Halo Infinite last year. There's all these games. A lot of AAA games have this, and I guess it's just pressure to get it out by a particular date, and they've done the analysis, and they've decided that maybe that negative PR is worth it because the sales will be improved by releasing it at that particular time. But but is it worth it? Like, I know this isn't kind of like the worst example, but like Cyberpunk, like this, they were getting sued by the shareholders. Their stock price tanked after the release of that game, and you would think at that point people would be, or publishers would be realizing kind of the potential negative impacts of releasing a broken game or a unfinished game. Surely it makes sense to just give games a little bit more time. But
yeah.
I guarantee we'll have this conversation 2 or 3 times next year.
Oh yeah.
If not more.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm looking forward to the Starfield launch.
Yeah, but funny you mentioned that, because that's a game that's been delayed, and inevitably we'll probably still have that conversation.
Oh yeah, it's a Bethesda game. It's not going to launch well.
Yeah, people still have that conversation about Halo now. That was delayed a year. It's been out a year, and people still say it should have been delayed until recently, when things like Forge came out, stuff like that. So
yeah, absolutely. I think like the problem, and it's just so frustrating, and it did. The thing is, at the moment as well, it's affecting every platform. Like there are games launching where it's not just like one platform, so you think, oh well, I could get it here, or I could run it here instead, and this one's really good. It's like Callisto, two of the 3 platforms have issues. Gotham Knights, every platform had an issue. Midnight Suns has just come out as well, which I will pick up, and that's getting mixed reviews to some extent on Steam, because again, it's got stutters. Not as bad as Callisto, but you have to do things like disable ray tracing even on high-end GPUs to get like really rock solid frames, and I don't think that's acceptable.
Yeah.
Like for if you're running a 2080 Ti still, then you're not going to get like amazing ray tracing performance. You'll get some pretty good, but that might be more difficult. But when people are running 4080s and 4090s, and the game is just not taking advantage of the hardware set, because these are just absolutely monster GPUs. It's weird. But we'll absolutely have this conversation next year. I mean, I'm looking forward to even seeing things how, like, Tears of the Kingdom going to run
Oh,
like?
Christ.
Yeah.
I mean, we've not even spoken about Pokemon. Obviously,
yeah.
that's...
Yeah, exactly.
Pokemon,
yeah,
you've got nowhere else to go for that one.
yeah, well, yeah. Pokemon's a rare case where not only does it look like garbage, it also runs like garbage. So it's not.
I think there's a recent
like,
patch which apparently fixed a lot of things, but it's still it's still issues.
So there's gonna be another one. There's very few developers I think you can rely on to release like super polished day one games. That are rock solid in performance. Probably count them on one hand. So
yeah, there's always a compromise, isn't there? Whether it be because I think I used Halo Infinite as an example before. I think performance wise, that game was generally fine. I don't recall there being too many technical hiccups, but the compromise there was it was missing some really core features of the game. I can't remember how the conversation around the performance at the time, but I don't think it was too bad or there were any significant issues. But
actually,
the compromise there was
it was pretty good.
Yeah, there was a few maps, there was no Forge, there was no co-op. So it was, there's always seems to be a compromise with these games. And I mean, we talk about Pokemon there. That's a game that's been and because of its technical performance over the past few weeks. But then at the same time, they came out and they said it had sold like 10 million copies within the first 3 days or something like that.
One.
Like,
performance or graphics in that game, it will just do well.
But then at the same time, that's why they do it.
Oh yeah,
they can
get away with that.
Yeah, if the
brand name is so strong.
Yeah.
If it was another game, they wouldn't.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
So, they wouldn't do. But that's just again Nintendo stuff is just an island onto its own, isn't it? Really.
I think the one thing I did find interesting about the Pokemon debacle though is that people were saying that Nintendo have actually apologized themselves on behalf of Game Freak for all these issues, and apparently that's like you don't really hear that from Nintendo if it's not their own game.
Yeah,
as you say, but it also goes to show how big and I mean, obviously we know Pokemon's massive, but how important it is to Nintendo that actually it always be correct. So the fact that they even apologize on their behalf, a lot of people online are saying that that's actually really big. Like Game Freak are probably right in the shit at the moment with Nintendo, but I doubt it. But
I mean, when they saw the sales numbers, they were probably like, all right, we'll give you a pass.
Exactly. They probably let them off. Yeah.
we'll send a tweet and we'll just continue to see the cash rolling in.
The amount of videos I've seen online of people like, funny like TikTok type things where people are saying about how awful the game is performance wise, graphically, whatever else. But then ultimately they say, oh no, like why are you still playing the game? Oh no, because the game's good. Like because they just love Pokemon that much. They just forgive every flaw that they openly see.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people say like, yeah, the technical performance is dreadful, but a lot of people in the same sentence are also saying that it's their favorite Pokemon game for some time. So there's obviously, they've obviously done some good there, but it's not necessarily the hardware in that case. It seems. I think. I've said many a time, I just really want Nintendo to release some upgraded hardware, but I think there has been some analysis done by I can't remember if it was Digital Foundry that did that as well, but they said, look, it's not the hardware here, it's an engine issue when you compare it to other games. Like I think they reference like Xenoblade Chronicles 3,
even Breath of the Wild, because that's like a 5-year-old game and that looks phenomenally better than what Pokemon's doing.
Yeah. So, like you said, we'll probably be, there'll be another Pokemon game coming out next year, and it'll probably have the same issues. Starfield will come out, and it'll probably run at 30 FPS, and a lot of people will be a little bit annoyed at that. So,
set your expectations now. There will be no 60 FPS on consoles for Starfield. If there is, Bethesda have done amazingly well.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing, isn't it? Gotham Knights started that conversation off where, I think early generation people have got this expectation now, 60 FPS. I certainly have, where people want games to run at 60. And I think we've gone through this sort of cross-generational period where games are developed for both platforms, and therefore we can get that game in higher fidelity and higher frame rates, and people have developed a taste for that. And Gotham Knights comes out 30 FPS only, and yeah, I guess, you know, I think again, Digital Foundry, obviously they do excellent work. I think Richard Ledbetter off the back, Gotham Knights came out and said, look, you're going to have to start expecting this. It's inevitable that games will be targeting 30 FPS as the generation progresses, and they try to push the hardware more to get, you know, better looking games, or, you know, whatever it may be. So
yeah, it's also, I think, I mean, if your game, like the thing that worries me about stuff like Starfield is that typically Bethesda games are super CPU intensive because of the nature of, you know, open world and lots of different systems. So the Gotham Knights is a bit weird because I really didn't expect that to have. I mean, you just, well, first of all, look at the game. Like, it doesn't look like it should only be 30 on consoles. But also, it is an open world, but it's not having, you know, there's no like super complex system stuff going on in the background. But I think as the generation goes on, if we're pushing, you know, if we're trying to push visuals and also have these complex systems that play, you know, heavy AI, that kind of stuff, like they will in Starfield, that's the thing that consoles are going to be pretty weak at. Because, you know, they can't, you know, first of all, I mean, clock speed's pretty good for the CPUs, but they just don't have the sheer kind of horsepower that some of the PC stuff does. And even on the PC side, like, I mean, you've seen it with like the 4090, like CPUs are bottlenecking that. Even the latest ones are bottlenecking it. So, because developers are trying at least somewhat to kind of bind their games more to CPU orientated tasks. You know, whereas before it's been very, very GPU heavy. So I do wonder what we're going to see as the generation goes on. I mean, I'd hope we at least get performance mode, even if on consoles, even if sacrifices have to be made to visuals and stuff like that. But we'll see. It's
interesting because, you know, when the generation came out, I mean, what's it, 2 years now? The consoles have been out, and there was so much talk around the generational leap between the previous gen and current gen consoles. And obviously we've had this 2 year period pretty much where we've had these 60 FPS games. But it goes to show that things move bloody quick in that space, and the hardware does get old pretty fast, and that's why we had the Xbox One X and the PlayStation 4 Pro, and honestly why I probably think we'll probably see another mid-gen refresh this time around. Maybe at least I'm not 100% certain on that, but you know, if we continue down this path, then maybe we do see it. So it's I've just seen a few notes in the chat there. So Paul says Starfield really needs a 60 FPS mod. I would agree, Paul, but I would also, as Luke said, set your expectations accordingly if you're playing that on Xbox. And then, and this is actually, I think, a little bit sad. Meisuke's comment, I think, was it Meisuke? Apologies, I can't see there. I think it was Meisuke who said there's going to wait a month or two to play Starfield. I think that's like that people have got that expectation now of certain games. I think that's a little bit unfortunate where you think, I'll give it a month, give it 2 months, because you're expecting performance issues, you know. So yeah, bit of a shame. I'm just conscious of time there, gents. I know we were going to talk about the ABK deal. There's a few little bits and pieces, but maybe we could save that for a future show, maybe in the new year, where maybe we've got a little bit more. But I thought at least one thing I would probably want to check in with you guys, particularly yourself, Luke, is just where you how you feeling about it at the moment. So I guess just to maybe provide a brief recap of what I can recall from the past couple of weeks. There was an article from Politico basically saying that the FTC were potentially lining up an antitrust trust lawsuit in the States in an attempt to block the deal. There were some sources that were saying that might be the case, although obviously nothing was guaranteed. I know there was a little bit of hoo-ha over the headlines of that article. I think since then, The Economist, I believe, have come out, and I think it was an opinion piece, but they basically said, look, it will be a bad deal. It will be a bad move to block the deal, I should say. And also since then, I believe the talk is that Sony have been offered a 10-year deal from Microsoft for Call of Duty, which I think is, I think the original deal was maybe 5 or 6. I think it was like an extra 3 years on top of the current deal, which maybe lasted for another 2 or 3 years, in an attempt to obviously get the deal to go through with some concessions. So, like I say, we don't have to spend too much time on it. We'll maybe save it for when we've got some more concrete news from either the FTC or the EU. But do you guys have any thoughts on that at the moment? Luke, has your opinion changed too much? Because I know you've kind of been moving towards, look, this has a real possibility of being blocked recently. Has any of this news changed your opinion at all?
Yeah, a little bit. I think it's been quite interesting the last few weeks, actually. That, as you say, the Politico article came out. The reaction to that article was really strange from people. People saying it was, clickbaity. It wasn't clickbaity at all. Like they said, it was likely, and then they said that the FTC would sue to block. And then they quoted like 3 sources that told them that that's what they thought. So I don't really know why people thought that was clickbaity. I think just because the FTC haven't come out and forwardly said that they will block, they'll sue to block it, doesn't mean that an article that says we've spoken to people at the FTC and this is what they think.
Yeah,
it's clickbaity. So that was a bit weird. The reaction to that. I think I mean, clearly regulators are having issues with this beyond just concerns, beyond just like, well, this might be an issue. Whether you agree with that or not is a different matter. And I think there's many arguments to say that concern is misplaced. Certainly, I think it is for the most part. I can see the rationale for some of the arguments that regulators are throwing out, but I don't think they're directly applicable here. Particularly because, as seems to have kind of trundled on, the main concern seems to be Call of Duty based. And, if the reports are correct and Microsoft have offered a 10-year deal to keep it on platforms, and in fact, they would probably just keep it on PlayStation beyond that because, economically, it wouldn't make sense for them not to do so.
Yeah, and they've said that that's what they would do. I mean, Phil Spencer said on numerous occasions, the deal that they're offering Sony, I guess, is beyond what a typical contract in the industry would be. But their intention is to release on PlayStation as long as there's a PlayStation to release on. And they've spoken about the financial implications of not doing so. Just simply wouldn't make sense. So I guess this is more just legally binding them to that commitment, I guess, for at least a period of time.
For at least a period of time, yeah, exactly, and it seems like I think Microsoft must think that the Call of Duty element is the main thing that regulators are worried about, and I think actually, I suppose even if you look at the CMA stuff and some of what the Commission have said, obviously they've had concerns about multi-game subscription services and cloud gaming and that they were areas of concern, but in a way, they all kind of tie back to Call of Duty because the concern is that, the advantage would be so great in having Activision content, specifically Call of Duty and those things, and not having it elsewhere, that would be an impediment to competition. Again, I don't necessarily agree with that take, but, that's at least a somewhat logical argument. So, I think the Call of Duty being guaranteed on PlayStation pretty much fixes most of that. It doesn't fix, Microsoft bringing those things to those services, but that would be a while away anyway because they've got these marketing deals with Sony for a number of years still. So I think it's really interesting, but clearly, like regulators are pretty on this at the moment. The FTC seem quite trigger happy potentially. The CMA obviously are in their phase 2, the EU are in their phase 2, but I think there was a report that Microsoft wanted to offer remedies to the EU quickly, which perhaps suggests that they're pretty confident, at least for the EU, that they can get the Commission kind of on board to clear it with concessions. CMA is a bit of an outlier. We don't really know what they're going to think from their phase 2. And the FTC have gone from being maybe the one that people expected to be the easiest out of the 3 to being like the one that might challenge it pretty significantly, which is really quite a turn of events. So let's wait and see. I think, we're going to see CMA provisional decision will come out in January. So we'll see what they say. And yeah, I just think it's been interesting. I mean, in terms of do I think it will go through? I'm still on the board that I think it will, but I think this might be certainly there's going to be concessions no matter what. This isn't just going to get cleared by the big regulators anyway. I am skeptical of how early next year they could close this based on current trajectory. I think it will probably go right up to the wire of the long stop, which is June, I think, June or July. So yeah, let's see. But Serbia cleared it. Go Serbia. Don't sell Xboxes there, but they cleared it. That's a win for Microsoft.
China cleared it as well, I believe.
Did they? Oh, okay.
If I'm not mistaken, or they will. There was some news this past week regarding China. But again, I don't think Xbox actually sell in China, do they?
No, and I think Active Blizzard are pulling out as well.
Yeah, their deal with NetEase has been either it's expired and it has been renewed, or it's been ended. I wonder if that's got anything to do with the acquisition, because obviously tensions between the States and the Chinese, not to get too political, aren't exactly great. So. I wonder if there's anything going on there. So, I mean, we're in the final stretch now, really, aren't we, Luke? Anyway, because we're expecting formal decisions by March in most cases, I believe. So, we're not too far away. Bucks, have you kept up to speed with the news regarding the deal recently? Do you have any thoughts, or are you like me, where at this point in time I'm kind of just wishing it was all over?
Yeah, I've kind of gotten to that point. I think I'm relatively on board of what's going on. But I do think that the more I've read and heard recently, the more, because originally I thought, this is all just kind of regulators just being a bit stiff about it because of how much money's involved and that kind of stuff. But then the more I've read about it, I can't remember the specifics verbatim or anything like that, but I know I've read some comments that came from Sony and some other people where, like, I could see where they were coming from with at least with the wording they used in these instances, and it doesn't help. I can't really remember what it was, but I think it was along the lines of what you guys might remember if I start talking. It was about Sony made a comment about Microsoft owning so many of these IPs or some other internal documents that Microsoft had to show, almost determined that they was trying to make Sony into the next Nintendo or something like that, in that they're just in their own lane doing stuff. But there's some wording used from Sony about it, which I could see where they were coming from.
Yeah. So I think the argument there from Sony, and correct me if I'm wrong, look, if you recall this, I think what they're referring to is specifically in the first-person shooter space, in the sense that you basically don't get first-person shooters on Nintendo Switch. Like, it's just not really a genre that you see on that platform these days. So the first-person shooter genre is just typically between Sony and Microsoft, at least in the console space, obviously ignoring PC for a moment. So by having Call of Duty and Halo and other games of that genre, they would effectively be pushing Sony out of that space, and Sony wouldn't be able to compete, and therefore would be like Nintendo in that respect. I believe that's kind of the angle they were coming at it from, which is they just wouldn't have any market share in that space anymore. I guess similar to how Xbox doesn't have much in the... I guess it's a little bit better recently, but like in the JRPG space, So is that about right, Luke? I can't...
I think that's right. Yeah.
But I do remember seeing pucks afterwards, like people were saying like, hold on, why would you want to be like Nintendo? Because obviously Nintendo did very good. Money. Yeah, but at the same time, Sony are currently making more money than Nintendo.
Yes.
So, while yes, they would want to be like Nintendo, I guess, in terms of, I mean, they already are in terms of the way people perceive them from the quality of their games. They're just different types of games, and they currently make more money than Nintendo. So, yeah, they don't want to be like Nintendo now because they'd be making less money, I guess, is maybe the...
Now, the other argument I find strange as well is, again, I do understand it overall, why the whole Call of Duty thing is the biggest part around it, but I don't know, part of me, when I read certain parts, makes me think that, like, Call of Duty, yes, Call of Duty's been around for a long time, and therefore it's gained dominance, not only due to its own quality, but because of the length of time it's existed as an IP. And I think there was even a point when they even brought, like, Sony themselves actually brought up Battlefield and said, well, EA have tried for years to try to get on top of this, but they failed with Battlefield. It was effectively
that was a bit of a burn, wasn't it?
I imagine they must have been looking at, like, EA must have been looking at that thinking, whoa, what are we talking about?
I mean, it's true. Yeah. I think that's the thing.
True,
I prefer Battlefield games over Call of Duty games personally, but you can't argue the fact that, like, between the two, one is significantly more popular than the other. And the thing is, Battlefield 2042 was their best opportunity to actually capitalize on kind of like waning popularity. I say waning loosely, I think, but obviously it was around the release of Vanguard, where the Call of Duty franchise was probably as lost in some time, and they made a complete fucking arse of the release of that game. And now Modern Warfare 2's out, Warzone 2's out, and Battlefield's making some improvements to the game, but it's never going to capture the popularity of either of those games, unfortunately for EA, and unfortunately for me, because I much prefer Battlefield as a franchise to Call of Duty.
Part of me does have a mindset, though, that, PlayStation does have a lot of money under its belt, and it's got all the good first-party studios in that, I'm not saying create their own Call of Duty or anything like that, but effectively, like, there is arguably no reason why you can't start creating your own competitor. I mean, I appreciate you need a lot of money and a lot of resource and a lot of talent. I'm not saying it's an easy job at all, but how it does bring up the argument in a way, I think, about how long can you rely on just this one franchise to you're almost claiming that it supports your whole ecosystem, when there's all manner of people out there that own PS5s and PS4s, whatever else, that hate Call of Duty, and actually they prefer all of the other first party IPs. So part of me thinks it's being blown out. I think Sony are pushing the boat a little bit, but equally in certain arguments, I understand where they're coming from. But overall, to answer your original question, Scott, I have reached a point now where it's like, I'm kind of fed up of hearing about it at the moment. But equally, it seems like it's in more trouble than I originally thought. I thought it was going to be a point where everyone would just be like, "Oh, Sony, you're just talking bollocks. You're just trying to push the boat out and trying to claim too much because you're not prepared to pay this yourself." Blah blah blah, and whatever. Big stamp comes out, approved or passed on a bit of paper, job done. But the more I'm reading, and the more it's kind of becoming a bigger and bigger issue, the more I'm thinking, actually, it feels like it's more at risk now than it ever has been. But whether or not it will happen, I'm in no position to say whether or not I think it will or won't. I don't know the full ins and outs at this stage to give a proper, dare I say, analysis of it all. Unlike Luke, but yeah, we'll see. But I'm kind of fed up of hearing it, and I think there's ways forward for all parties, but everyone just seems to care about Call of Duty, and I'm kind of fed up of talking about it. I haven't even got the latest one myself. That's how kind of little I care about it. I enjoy the betas and stuff, but there's just so many, for me at least, there's so many other decent games coming out that I think, in a way, part of me feels like I'm past the COD bandwagon a little bit, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we'll see. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit now, but...
No, that's
yeah, no, it's I think, I mean, there is a big focus on Call of Duty. I personally don't like the counter argument that well, Sony could just make a Call of Duty like competitor, because I think that it does two things. It underplays the amount of money and resource that goes into Call of Duty, and overstates how easy it is to make something like Call of Duty. You know what I mean? Like, Call of Duty has, up until recently, was a yearly development cycle, effectively, using well, not yearly for the studio, but a game released, once every year, using 5 or 6 AAA studios plus outsourcing at any given time to do all of these things, and hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars in development money every year. Could Sony theoretically, say, oh, actually, you know what, Naughty Dog, Sony Santa Monica, Bend, Insomniac, you're all going to make, let's just say SOCOM now, right? You're going to take you
bring back Killzone.
Else. Yeah, get Guerrilla involved as well, because they got first party experience. I'll get Bungie involved as well. Get all of them involved, and we're going to make a first party competitor. That's great. Maybe just let's say Sony want to do that. That works. Where does their other money go? For what? Like for all their other games? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like these studios can't then make anything that they were making. It's not as if Naughty Dog can go, well, we're also making The Last of Us Part 3. So that's not a feasible business thing to do. I mean, Activision's, apart from Activision Blizzard, effectively every other one of their studios works on Call of Duty. They are effectively a Call of Duty publisher, along with Blizzard stuff. So I don't think that's really feasible. And what people seem to underestimate is that, let's say they released a game. SOCOM came out. It's the best thing since sliced bread. It's an amazing game. It won't do as well as Call of Duty because it doesn't have 20 plus years of great IP goodwill behind it, recognizable in the public sphere. So SOCOM's a cool franchise, and I know people talk about it all the time as if it's like, oh yeah, we should just bring back SOCOM. If you ask most people, would they know what SOCOM was? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, would they know that SOCOM even exists as a franchise, or that it did exist?
Really?
So, like, they just wouldn't. So it wouldn't. It could come out and it'd be great, but it would be like, it would be in the same kind of category as Battlefield, where even less so. I mean, everybody, most people know what Battlefield is, even if they may not buy it or it may not be a great release. So I really don't like that argument because, that's kind of the exact thing that regulators are trying to prevent. Like, people can say, oh, well, yeah, but it's just, Sony could just make this game. Well, yeah, but Microsoft aren't making this game. They're buying an entire publisher that make the game. So it's not as if they're trying to get it from the... if Microsoft tomorrow were trying to build their own first-person shooter, it would be very different. And then suddenly it was a real big success. Great. But the regulations like this over mergers and acquisitions exist because they're trying to stop mergers and acquisitions that are, could have a really big anti-competitive effect. Do I think Call of Duty, do I think this one has a big anti-competitive effect? No, I don't. I don't think that at all. But I don't like the counter argument. Well, just Sony could just make a game like that.
Yeah.
What would they have to risk to do it? What would they have to do to be able to compete? And how long would it take? And how viable would it be? Probably not very.
Yeah. And, you mentioned Sony creating new franchises, but we spoke about Halo and Battlefield. Like, look at how they've struggled to eat into that market share as established franchises. These have been around as long as Call of Duty, and even they struggle to compete. There's a couple of comments in chat at the moment just around, that just being business, or that's not an argument to stop the deal. And I think, Luke's just said that he's not saying that is an argument to stop the deal.
No. I just think that counter argument is a silly counter argument.
Yeah. And I'd agree. Microsoft are buying Call of Duty. They're not creating Call of Duty or a competitor to Call of Duty. Sony can't do that. They couldn't afford Activision Blizzard seemingly. So I don't think anyone's saying that that's a reason for the deal not to go through. In fact, Luke's saying the opposite himself. He's just talking about that particular argument that people are making regarding the game. So we've got a few more months left. On the subject of Activision Blizzard, Luke, more on games that I think we're more interested in. We should hopefully hear some news about Diablo 4 at the Game Awards. I didn't touch on that earlier.
Release date,
that's one thing I'm really excited for. And I'll buy the game if the deal isn't done and it's not in Game Pass, or if the deal doesn't get done, I will buy Diablo Day 4. But that would be an amazing game for Game Pass if that deal goes through before that game's released. That's probably the one game I'm more excited for. And it's funny that we're talking about Call of Duty so much. Because my hope is if the deal goes through, my hope is that less studios work on Call of Duty. I want Microsoft to leverage some of the other studios to work on other games other than Call of Duty that maybe Activision Blizzard in its current state can't do, because as a company they're so financially reliant on that franchise being successful that maybe with Microsoft's backing they could spread their wings a little bit. But I mean, I doubt that'll be the case. We'll still have them all on. But it would be nice if like Toys for Bob could work on other games. Right. I know it's already been done, but Vicarious, if they could somehow undo that change and things like that, those are kind of the things that I would hope might come from the deal. I personally couldn't give a shite about Call of Duty as part of this deal, to be perfectly honest. I played a bit of Warzone recently, but then I play Halo and I'm like, it's just not as good as Halo, so I'm not going to play it as much. So I just seen the message from Ash there saying, breaking news, Scott from GPG calls so many poor peasants who can't afford shit. I'm sure they've got a little bit of cash in the bank. I wouldn't mind having a little bit of what they've got, Ash, but not many companies can afford $70 billion acquisitions, can they, in the world? So
just the two in the gaming space, which is Microsoft and Tencent, basically. So
yeah, exactly. And that's why regulators are there, to make sure that these things are done.
I just want to touch on a point as well.
Yeah, go for it.
And I see this a lot, that people say, well, it's business, this kind of stuff. And I think that fundamentally, again, I am not against the merger at all, right? I want it to happen. I've said this countless times, from a selfish Game Pass perspective, and also because I think Microsoft will probably open up the reins on these developers a bit to make other stuff, which would be amazing. But you can't, you can't come in to markets. The point of regulating from a competition perspective, mergers and acquisitions, is precisely to prevent against people coming into a market and saying, well, competitor X and Y, we've got much more money than you have. So in fact, actually, we're just going to buy stuff to compete, right? That's not... consolidation and mergers and acquisitions are a healthy part of a competitive industry. But the point of all of these regulatory bodies, and the reason that all of this stuff gets subsumed into their purview so that they can look at it, is to prevent against this sort of stuff from happening. I'm not saying Microsoft are being anti-competitive by any means, because the gaming industry is so big and there are so many franchises and there is so much market that it would take Microsoft buying many, many publishers, I think, personally, to be able to, cause a competitive issue, like a genuine competitive issue. But the point is, it's not just business for someone to come in and go, well, we'll just buy up. We've got the money more than any other company here, so we'll just buy up significant parts of the industry. So I think, I don't really like that argument. I think there are better arguments to rely on if you're in favor of the deal. And the main ones are just many of the arguments that Microsoft have talked about, in that, Sony are a much more established brand than Microsoft still in the gaming space. They do better. They are a bigger gaming, company, quote unquote, than Microsoft. So, acquisitions in of themselves aren't inherently bad, but it depends on the context and it depends on the rationale for them. So, I don't like that kind of argument. As well. You can hold it, I just don't like it.
What I would maybe ask people to think of is, let's imagine we lived in an alternative universe where Stadia was successful, and let's say Google decided that they were going to purchase Activision Blizzard, Capcom, FromSoft, EA. People would probably want regulators to step in and say, hold on, you can't just go around splashing this cash. I think that part of the problem is we obviously are very invested in this particular industry, and we've maybe got some almost tribal sort of instincts when it comes to defending our brands in some cases. And I know that's not everyone, so I'm not saying anyone in particular is that way. But if this was the other way around, if this was Sony making such a large acquisition, ignoring whether that's feasible or not, or like I say, Google or maybe even Amazon coming in and they were spending that kind of money to corner off the market, you would want regulators to come in and make sure that this isn't going to harm the industry or harm us as consumers. And it's important to know that none of these regulators have made a decision yet. Not one of them has blocked it yet. Now, if they come out and they block it, and we can have that discussion then. But no one's come out and blocked it. And of course, Sony are going to state their case for why they don't think the deal should go through, or to make sure if it does go through that they have the best possible deal regarding Call of Duty as possible. Because of course they are. It's in their best interest to do so. And Gogglepot, I know I mentioned 4 publishers. I know I was trying to use an extreme example to say, regulators have a job to do. Yes, that would be an extreme example. But, if you use the argument that's just business, well, 4 publishers is just business, isn't it? In the same way that 1 publisher is just business. But it's not. These regulators have a job to do. And, we can disagree with their outcome when they make those decisions. But, they're there for a reason, and they do, I think it's fair to say, a good job in most cases. They're not doing this to harm Microsoft or to harm Sony or to, be on Sony's side. They're really on the consumer side. So, yeah, it's always intense when you get into this level of detail on it, especially when like I said, no one's actually made a decision just yet. So,
yeah. I mean, it's all pretty. It's really. Ash's comment in the chat with Big Daddy Jim. So yeah, well, yeah, he did obviously. But
remember the PS Plus CMA tier?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the really good PS Plus tier that nobody else gets. Yeah, I mean, yeah, look, I think that's right. Look, this consolidation in the industry, particularly right now, that's fine to an extent, but I just think people, if Microsoft buy, if it all goes through, then they have in the last few years bought 2 pretty massive publishers, and I'm in Bethesda and or ZeniMax and then Activision Blizzard. And again, I'm not saying that is anti-competitive by any means, but they are doing a thing that basically nobody other than Tencent in the industry that exists can do. Other companies simply can't compete with that. So there's a kind of limit really to where that then becomes an issue. I don't think we've hit that yet. But for example, if Microsoft turned around after Activision Blizzard and they went, we're also looking at buying EA and then Ubisoft, then it's a real problem.
Yeah.
Right. And then regulators would absolutely step in and be like, no, you can't do this stuff.
Yeah, and then at that point, the argument of it just being business, or that's how things just work. There's a limit to how far. Well, I guess that argument doesn't sort of stand anywhere, really.
No,
but like I said, I use the extreme example. But yeah, if Microsoft had turned around and decided they were going to buy another publisher later, I don't think you can just say, well, that's just business. They're just spending money, because they're then slowly but surely turn themselves into like a gaming monopoly at that point, which is exactly what those regulators want to try and avoid.
Yeah, effectively. So well, obviously we're not there yet. I don't agree with any argument that you would be there through buying Activision Blizzard, but I think maybe one of the reasons and certainly I think you see this in some of the CMA stuff, one of the reasons that they're kind of focusing down on this is because there are these emerging markets that they've identified, and they're a bit worried that Microsoft doing these things with Activision Blizzard could harm competition in those areas. Now, you can disagree with those arguments. I personally disagree with them as well, but I don't think it's irrational for regulators to be looking at that. and look, I mean, as you said, Scott, like none of the big regulators have made a decision on this yet, so this could all be for naught. And the CMA and EU come out and they go, yeah, we want some concessions, but otherwise it's approved. And the FTC might go, actually, we don't want we don't want to go to court over this. So fine, we want some concessions as well, and then it's all done, and people can stop talking about it. But we don't know where that's going to go yet. So and I mean, I think Guardian Black mentioned, for example, where were regulators when Disney bought Star Wars and Marvel and all those stuff. And I think regulators again looked at all this stuff, like they did push some of this to phase 2, if I remember, in different jurisdictions. But clearly, I do get the analogous look at that in terms of what's happening now. And I would probably agree that I don't think that Microsoft owning Activision Blizzard is a real competitive issue that's detrimental to consumers on a long-term basis. But you just can't account for arguments of regulators and the things that they will think, particularly when you're dealing with nascent markets like cloud gaming and game subscription and all that sort of stuff. So we'll wait and see.
Yeah, and I think on that note, we'll maybe finish the show there. We've been going 2 hours now, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more to say on the ABK deal in the new year. Obviously as we get towards the deadlines in March, so there's still a lot more to say there. And hopefully we'll have something a little bit more concrete at that point to discuss as well.
Not just the Serbia approval.
Yeah, exactly. Or a political article, or Michael Pachter.
Michael Pachter chatting shit
again.
It,
it's still, whenever I see his name, I'm always taken aback by why is what he says still being used. So so I'll take the opportunity now just to thank everyone for dropping by. I appreciate just a few names I can see here. We've got UK Dazarus, Guardian Black. I think that's the first time I've seen you in the show, mate. Apologies if not. Appreciate you stopping by. Gogglepole, Ash dropped by. Appreciate you dropping by there, Ash. Poxy, Stubbs, BMG was in earlier. Who else was in there? There's a few more, but my mouse has died, so I can't scroll up. Thank you all very much for joining us. Obviously, a little bit different this week with us being live on a Sunday morning. We are back next week, as I mentioned. We'll be having our post-game awards show with Ian's from Season Game, and so I'm really looking forward to that because I'm hoping we're going to have some really good announcements to dig into. So, but yeah, thank you very much everyone for joining. Pucks, thank you very much for being part of the show, my friend. Hopefully you had an enjoyable morning.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. No, thanks for hosting again, Scott. Really appreciate it.
Wonderful. And Luke, actually, just before I go to Luke, I just want to say I've just noticed Gogglepole's message there. Nothing to be sorry for, mate. We're here to debate these things and discuss them. Yeah. So appreciate your points. They give us something to discuss and go back on. So no arguments there, mate. No need to apologize whatsoever. So, Luke, thank you very much, mate. Hopefully you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that point as well. Yeah, don't ever be sorry for that. I think there's a big problem with certain other podcasts out there, which is that they become this horrible kind of fanboy echo chamber where everybody agrees, and the discussions that the hosts have are really one-sided. And I think that's just incredibly fucking boring, to be honest. So if you if you vehemently disagree, then please say that. Debate's great. It makes everything more interesting. So if you just call us out on stuff, and we can talk about it. That's endlessly more interesting than just being an echo chamber, I think. So particularly on this, where you can have different views, even though we kind of all broadly hold the same view, I think. So yeah, don't be sorry for that. But otherwise, yeah, really enjoyed that.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, thank you all very much for joining. Like I say, we'll be back next Sunday. So we'll hope to see you in the chat then. But thank you all very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next show.